Welcome to An Unconventional Life, a podcast where we share stories about the crazy 1% out there who earned their doctoral degrees and then went on to use them in crazy, cool, unique, and unconventional ways. Here's your host, astrophysicist turned teacher, author, dissertation coach, and more, Dr. Russell Strickland.
Hello and welcome to An Unconventional Life. I'm your host, Dr. Russell Strickland, and I have with me today Dr. Jamie Ball. Dr. Ball, I can't wait to have this conversation with her. She is a kind of an unconventional doctoral student who earned her doctoral degree and then went into this kind of traditional academia career path. So she could be your dissertation chair. She's going to be able to talk about that. She does some research right now, so she'll be able to still empathize with those of you who are going through that for your dissertation. Some other interesting things, she mentioned teaching English as a foreign language before. We're going to talk a little bit about that. We've had another one of our guests that's done that in the past, which I think is really cool. And she also has a little bit of an entrepreneurial bent, which you guys know around here I really love. So can't wait to introduce you to Dr. Jamie Ball and get this thing rolling. But first, this episode is brought to you by Dissertation Done. If you are a doctoral student who is about to start on the dissertation, you do yourself a favor and proactively go out there and get some support, whether it's through us here at Dissertation Done or not. If you'd like to come to Dissertation Done, go to dissertationdone.com/done, and we can see about getting you hooked up with our Fast Track Your Dissertation coaching program. We save our students a good year or two on their time to graduation, get folks graduated a lot sooner than they thought they could. And so you should do that whether you are about to get started on your dissertation, you have started on your dissertation, or you're struggling and you feel like you're about at your wit's end and ready to quit your dissertation. Reach out to us first at dissertationdone.com/done. And if you're an expert out there and you want to expand your authority, you want to let more people know about your area of expertise, there is hands down no better way to do that than by being a published author and literally writing the book on your area of expertise. We take folks from a blank page to a published book, and we handle all the editing, publishing, and that sort of thing for you. So it's a great program. Reach out to us at dissertationdone.com/book if you would like to get started on that process. So enough of that for now. Dr. Jamie, thank you so much for being with us. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
All right. Well, we were having a little bit of a conversation before we got started, and it's very interesting that I'm sure folks are going to want to hear all about stories that you have about working with dissertation students currently. But before we get there, tell me a little bit about how you got into a doctoral program and what motivated you to make that decision.
What actually motivated me to make that decision was being disrespected by local politicians when I tried to become active. I was younger then, and
weren't we all?
Yes. They didn't hear a word I said, treated me like a dumb blonde, and patted me on the rump, and off I went, you know. And I just thought, you know what? I am going to make you respect me by becoming an expert.
That is awesome. I read that Shaquille O'Neal, basketball player, did the same thing. I'm not sure about the pat on the rump and the blonde hair, but yeah, he said that he was, dumb jock basically playing basketball and knew that there was going to be a career after basketball. He wanted to be respected by people when he wanted to go into a business deal. And so he went out and got a doctoral degree. So
wow.
They would have to respect him, and kudos to him for that. So yeah, that's a very cool, you get something you have in common with 7'1" Shaquille O'Neal.
Wow. I'm in good company.
No doubt. So you were trying to move ahead in your career, being disrespected, decided, well, once, I have this credential, you'll have to listen. And how did that work out? Did you find out that people received you differently?
In some cases, yes. It does depend upon, especially if you're interacting with the government on any level, it depends upon the level that you're interacting with. Mm-hmm. When you're interacting with the average person like you and me who go to work every day and, do everything that you're supposed to do, they did treat me with respect. But when you started to get uh, with leaders in the state, at the state level. I haven't gone beyond that. They started to become disrespectful again. They just didn't care. And those were the ones I was certain to make call me Dr. Ball. But interacting with social workers and people at the county level and things like that, now that was very different. They did treat me with respect. My opinion and my evidence was respected, and I think it was even appreciated because I encountered some small successes.
That's good. That's good. All right, so let's take a step back. This is why you decided to get into the doctoral program. What was it like when you first enrolled in your doctoral program? Compare that doctoral class experience with, say, your master's degree or university college level.
Sure. The first thing I encountered was difficulty writing at the scholarly level, which was
Wow.
shocking to me because I've always been well written. So I had a little bit of difficulty understand. They kept saying, you need to find your academic voice. You need to find your academic voice. And I was fortunate to have a couple of patient professors, and it didn't take long, but I was surprised that they didn't have it to start with. I had a couple of patient professors, and once I mastered that, that seemed to get much better.
Well, that's good. That's good. Yeah, a lot of us, by the time you get to your doctoral degree program as an adult, you spend a lot of time in business in one way or the other. You know, whether you're working in a corporation, whether you hang out your own shingle, whatever it is. And that writing, although formal, is very, very different from academic writing. So it does take a little bit of getting used to. It's like another dialect. It's still English, but also different.
There were times I would joke and I would read a sentence and say to everybody, that came out of my mouth. That different.
So, so once you felt a little more comfortable about the writing, how did the classes go at that point?
For the most part, classes went well until I hit the dissertation phase, where I had discovered that I was not adequately prepared through coursework to conduct research. So much of my learning was accomplished independently. I, for example, never had a stats class. They've changed that since then.
Yeah, because usually you have one or two.
Right.
Because we talk to doctoral students all the time. I know you're a quant person, so I'm sure you're going to, well, I'm not sure, but I think you'll agree with me. I recommend that everybody undertake a quantitative dissertation.
I agree.
I do that because interviewing a bunch of people might sound like it's easier than doing the math, but the thing is, you've got to spend your time talking to each one of those people. And right now, we're still in this sort of COVID pandemic lockdown kind of time frame. So universities and committees have gotten a lot more casual about letting folks conduct those interviews in an appropriately socially distanced way, which means like through Zoom, basically. So before this COVID, Zoom was allowed, but it was not looked upon. It was
frowned upon.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And the reason for that, it's a good reason. The closer you are to someone in terms of the mode of communication, more intimate the mode of communication, the better, more rich responses you get from them. They're more invested. They trust you more. They get to see your body language. And so they're going to pick up on cues that you're interested in, and they'll keep talking. But also you've both invested some time and energy to get to the same spot in the world at the same time. And believe it or not, that level of commitment creates a lot of value on the back end. So that's always the way people want to do it before this. I don't know if we'll get back to that after the lockdown, or if this will be one of those things that'll change and become the new normal. But it's a lot of commitment, a lot of time to do that.
Yes.
And then once it's time to analyze the data, well, you got to do all that yourself. There's tools that make it easier for you to do it, but you're doing it. The tools aren't doing it.
Yes.
You go the quantitative route, and the tool does the work. You just have to understand what it did.
Yes.
So that's my take. I don't know. What do you think?
Oh, I absolutely agree with you. Qualitative takes a lot longer. There's more difficulties analyzing the data. I have done a little bit of work that way, but I also love the instant epiphany from the quantitative work. I run my statistics. It takes a couple of minutes. I look at the graphs and tables and things that it print out, and I go, ah, and I have my light bulb moment.
And sometimes you're absolutely right. You see a relationship you didn't know was there. If you were doing some sort of exploratory work, for most of our doctoral students, we don't want you doing exploratory work. We want you to have a very specific, sort of hypothesis. It's just a yes no question, and you get the answer. And we tell our students it doesn't matter if it's yes, no, or maybe so. You write it down and you move on. You just justify it, and you back it up, and then you keep going. So a lot easier to tell folks, hey, go without bothering me, go spend 15 minutes on this survey, hit the button, it'll show up in my data file. I'll hit another button and I'll get the answer. I really believe that's a lot easier than what these folks do with qualitative, Anyway, so you take these classes and you get to the dissertation phase. And like you said, you feel a little bit unprepared as you walk into that moment. I have a background in physics and math and things like that. And a Nobel Prize winning physicist wrote in his biography, his name was Richard Feynman, that scientists tend to think that the next generation of scientists will learn science just kind of by osmosis, by being around science. We don't really teach science. I mean, in fourth grade, they talk about scientific method, and that's not how anybody does things. I mean, ultimately, you want to make sure it all works at the end, but it's a real messy business. And then at the end, you come back and you say, okay, let's do the test. Okay, it works. So, but this notion of trying things and failing and trying something else and figuring it out is something that we don't really teach. We just kind of do somehow. And I think that's true on the dissertation as well, that everybody just thinks, if you just jump in with both feet, you'll figure it out. And it's unfortunate that committees either can't in some cases or don't in most cases really tell students how to get their dissertation done.
That's right. It's a very common problem. And the chair's duties there are very important, and you get such a wide variety of what they believe in, where some chairs are like, figure it out, this is independent learning, to, then you can have a chair that does a little bit of teaching. And you don't know what you're going to end up with most of the time. And that relationship between the student and the committee is so important. And you don't ever want to look at your chair and say, I'm unhappy with you. Not a good idea.
Yeah, you have to be very careful about how you say it, because you do have to say that at some point if the situation warrants. But it is hard to complain to someone who ultimately decides whether you're going to graduate or not.
Yes, you have to be very artful when you want to assert a complaint.
And then, of course, a little inside baseball. You work with at the university level now. You advise and teach people and sit on dissertation committees. I've done that in the past. The fact of the matter is that most universities, the responsibility that they give dissertation chairs is to sort of grade the manuscript, grade the draft as you go through, and act as a little bit of a secretary, transferring work back and forth and letting someone know about deadlines, but only to the most, at the highest level. I mean, we're not talking about breaking things down and giving you homework,
right?
Which is what we actually do at dissertation does. We kind of tell you, this is what you need to do this week, and this is what you need to do next week to make sure that you're moving forward. But for the most part, they'll let you know that, hey, something has got to be turned into me by the end of the quarter, or else you get a failing grade for this course. Because universities always have you in a course even when you're working on your dissertation. And that's about it. That's what, if a dissertation chair is doing his job or her job as set up by the, job requirements and job description, they're not necessarily teaching, and they're not going out and stewarding and advising. They're just telling you what you did wrong, and maybe telling you when you should be doing something else.
Yes, a lot of times I call it the phenomenon of reading the mind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When you hire a coach such as yourself, the guesswork is taken out of it. Now you have the actual assistance and somebody with the experience to help guide you through the process that isn't going to go figure it out.
A lot of the guesswork. I mean, we're still guessing sometimes what a committee member wants, but we've seen a lot and are better guessers than most students.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, it's like I tell folks all the time, if you ever watch the Olympics, the Summer Olympics, when you see the diving or gymnastics, or the Winter Olympics with the figure skating, at the end of the event, we don't have a time or a measurement or something like that. We have scores that go across the bottom of the screen, and all these world-class judges watching a world-class athlete do a world-class exhibition can't figure out what they just saw. The scores are never the same. They're usually close, but they're never the same.
Yes, but they're never the same.
And that's exactly what happens with your dissertation. You get people who know what they're talking about, who've seen a lot of dissertations, and they look at it and they all disagree about what they saw. At a high level, they agree. 80 to 90% they agree on whether individual elements are good or bad. But that 10 to 15%, 10 to 20% drives doctoral students crazy.
Yes, I always tell the students that there's more than one way to accomplish their research, or more than one way to skin a cat. And now you've got to defend your way, and everybody's going to have a different idea about what the best way is. So
I think the best way is whatever your committee tells you.
Yes.
Don't argue about it. Get it done. A lot of folks like to think that it's their dissertation. It's really your committee's dissertation. When they're happy with it, you graduate and you don't ever have to see them again. You can go off and do your work, and you don't have to get permission from anyone to do it anymore. You have that doctoral degree now, and you're qualified to do your own research at that point.
Yes, and that's the best part.
Speaking of which, let's go back to the dissertation for a moment. You mentioned that you struggle a little bit with the doctoral classes and finding your voice, and then with the dissertation, getting some of the background and statistics and so forth. Once you got into the dissertation, how would you describe the experience from there? Were there any specific challenges that you faced?
Oh my, there were a lot of challenges. At my school, and I went online, they developed a quality control mechanism, so to speak, and they would assign a quality reviewer that could trump your committee, for starters.
Yeah.
And many of them, they didn't care if they were an expert on your topic or in your method or design. And I received a person who was experienced in higher education, and I was studying something ex post facto with urban elementary school students. So she didn't have the knowledge needed for ethics regarding the treatment of that population. She was qualitative, I was quantitative, and it led to, at one point, my chair got into it with her, and the fight went all the way to the dean.
Well, good for you and having a chair who will do that, because I think that is rare. Universities that have those mechanisms set up, I think that too often the quality control person forgets what their job is. They're not actually a member of the committee. They're just trying to make sure that you've got like a proper dissertation, not a coloring book that's going through this process. If the committee all gets together and decides we're going to put this crazy thing through, you need somebody saying, no, that doesn't work. But
Right.
otherwise, they're not on your committee. They're not guiding the work. They're not designing the work. They're just saying, okay, this is what you want to do. That's fine. I had a similar situation when I was a dissertation chair, where I had a person who was a quality control type person and thought that it was his job to rewrite the methodology and change the research questions and all this sort of thing, which people on the committee could do that. But if you're not on the committee, you just look at what we're giving you and say, if there's something really wrong with it, that's one thing. But so when you're talking about getting into it with him, I found out what is got from the program director, his phone number, and actually called him up and said, hey, this is, what's going on with this project. I'd like to walk you through why we're making some of these decisions and see what we can do to come together on this. That conversation, I can't remember how many minutes it lasted, but he was very adamant and sure that he wasn't going to let anything go unless it was done his way. And at some point he got frustrated and said, well, if you don't care if it's done right or not, then I'll sign off on it. And the word but was going to come out of his mouth. And I knew that. But as he was saying that, I could see where it was going. And as soon as he said that, I said, that would be great. Thank you. And he was like in fourth gear, and all of a sudden the transmission dropped out of the car. He's like, I was still going. I was like, nope.
Good for you. I do. I am now part of the dissertation quality control at work. And my standard is, can I recreate what you're doing?
Yeah.
If it's missing information and I couldn't go out and copy what you're doing, so typically that's the kind of quality I'm looking for. Periodically, I'll discover that there's something wrong with the way the student was going to analyze their data. You catch that kind of thing, but I don't like to naysay a chair.
Yeah.
So
No, I
if
think that's about
information's
right.
missing,
The idea of making sure that you actually have a definitive plan in there is really important. I know too many committees will let students get through the process without that. And then the poor student is like, okay, what do I do? Like, I don't have a plan, so I don't know what to do.
yes.
And so it's good to make sure that that gets caught. It's unfortunate when that gets through, a proposal like that gets through a committee. And the extra bit of, are you doing this right? I think is important. If I'm asking if the sky is blue and I'm looking at the ground, it's a little hard to determine. So look up. So I think that's important. But then to ask the question, well, should we care if the sky is blue or any of those sorts of things? That was the committee's job to put that together. And I think that's a good balance to strike.
Yes.
So, well, so when you go through and you're checking on these to make sure that you could replicate the study, how do you determine whether they have enough information?
Literally, the standard is, could I go out and repeat what they're doing?
Mm-hmm.
Have they presented enough detail to me that I could literally go out and recreate their study? If I'm missing key pieces of information, like how big their sample size is or expected to be, or I don't know how they're gathering informed consent, or they didn't identify their variables and explain them so that I could recreate the statistical test,
Mm-hmm.
or even determine they selected the correct statistical test. Those are the kinds of things. I don't very often feel the need to change somebody's research question, but
Right.
periodically you'll get one where clearly they're asking, say a predictive question, but they're looking at group differences. And then I might say, you need to change the first few words.
Right.
But
Right.
just
Well,
that kind of thing.
one of the things I tell our students all the time is that if I was going to go bake a cake, I could go ask a baker how to do that. And they would give me a card and it would say, here's what you need, here's what to do with the stuff, and here's when you'll have a cake. And we call it a recipe. And we want you to have a recipe for your dissertation. And a good way to start is, a research plan needs to answer 3 questions. It sounds like elementary school. Who are you going to talk to? What are you going to ask them? And what are you going to do with their answers? Now, those are kind of basic questions, but they are deep. Each one of those. Who are you going to talk to? Well, who exactly is it? What's the population? What's the sample? How are you going to get from one to the other? How are you going to recruit them? How are you going to determine of all the people in the world whether they belong in your group or not in your group? So there's some involvement to that, but it's an easy concept to understand. And then what are you going to ask them? What does the instrumentation look like? Is it an interview? Is it a survey? Is it a measurement? You could blow up tires until they explode. That could be what you're going to ask them. Is at what pressure do you fail? And then do an analysis on that. So that's where we ask students to start the process. In fact, is let's get together that what I call an instant roadmap for your dissertation. Let's know where you're going before you even start. And once you can do that, a lot of these other pieces just kind of start to make sense, because it's obvious you're going to that project of, I'm going to, these are the people I'm going to recruit. This is how I'm going to interact with them. And this is what I'm going to do once I collect that data. When you know where you're going, it's a lot easier to get there, is what we found. And that's contrary to what a lot of universities do, where they just tell you kind of go out, wander in the woods until until you hit a dissertation or a dissertation hits you.
Yeah, we see that a lot.
I call that the bloodhound approach to the dissertation process, because it's that's what students seem like. They're just taking the next step. They kind of sniff over here and sniff over there, and you're like, okay, I think I need to go this way. And you take a step or two, and you're like, now let me sniff again and see which way I need to go. And you never know where you're going, but you think you might be able to figure out a path if you just keep taking one step at a time. But that's just such a slow process, and bloodhounds lose the scent all the time, and it's not pretty when they do, particularly if they're doctoral students.
Oh, that's for sure.
So, well, what are some interesting things that you have seen since you've moved from the student side to the advisor side to the chair side of the equation? What are some interesting things that you've seen students do that some of our students might identify with and might feel a little better knowing, hey, I'm not the only one?
Well, the first thing is that how alone they feel, especially if they're doing an online program.
You guys, I told you.
Mm-hmm. They feel very alone. I felt very alone. And I found that I even refer my own students. It's like, look, there are Facebook groups for people who are just writing their dissertation, or for alumni from here, all kinds of things. Go seek out a few of those, and that way you have somebody to sort of commiserate with.
I tell folks you need someone to celebrate with and someone to commiserate with, because hopefully both of those things are going to happen.
Well, and it's also nice to be able to get advice from somebody who might be a step ahead or might be finished. And what changed then is
even helping someone who might be a step behind is very good too, because it helps you to internalize and to feel better about the things that you've already accomplished. So yeah, I think these groups, they don't have to be uniform in any way in terms of where you are in the process. Getting people that are ahead of you to help you, helping people that are behind you, both are very valuable for you, not to mention for the other people in the community.
Yes, I strongly recommend them. I even encourage my students to form study groups. They'll say, hey, would you post an announcement? I sure will. Write it up, I will post it for you. So finding somebody, because, when you talk about it at home and you're sharing with your spouse or your children or your best friend, about your dissertation or your research, watch their eyes glaze over.
That's right. So I had a student contact me, first call we ever had. She tells me, I need help. I'm like, sounds great. I like to give help. Let's go. And what she needed help with was the fact that last night she told her husband to shut the hell up. He didn't know what he was talking about. I was like, whoa, I'm not that kind of doctor.
That kind of help.
I'm not that kind of doctor. And she says, no. You need to hear what he said. I'm still not that kind of doctor, but okay, go ahead. And she said what he told her. He said they get along great. They don't ever argue. They don't ever fuss. Decades long marriage. And what he told her was, honey, I know you're smart enough. You can do this. And that's when she told him, shut the hell up. You don't know what you're talking about. And she was right. He didn't know what he was talking about. He was trying to be supportive in the best way that he could be supportive. But when you're feeling like you're failing, whether it's true or not, when you're feeling that way, then that kind of support seems like someone's placating you or almost taunting you.
Yes.
Whereas someone else who's been through it before, it can feel uplifting and empowering.
Yes.
And to test that hypothesis, I actually, by the end of our phone call, first time I talked to her, I used the same words and told her, listen, I know you're smart enough. You can do this. And she told me, thank you. Her husband, she jumped down his throat.
Yes.
But it was because, again, you do need people who've been there before, who've been around the block, and who can say, I know what I'm talking about, and you can do this, go. Sometimes you need people who say, I know what I'm talking about. This is what you need to do. This is how to do it. You need both operational and emotional support to get through this process.
Well, that's the other interesting thing that kind of shocked me now that I'm on the other side of it,
Mm-hmm.
is that I will have students come to me, or they will approach me at work and say, this quantitative student is having difficulties, can we all meet? And I'm always shocked when a student comes to me and says, I don't know what's going on, and I make a recommendation, and then they go, you don't know what you're talking about. We get that periodically as well.
Yeah.
Not so, not so often, but I would have never, while I was going through this process, said to anybody who had their doctorate and conducted research, say you don't know what you're talking about. I might say, I'm not sure that's a good idea. Could you explain more?
Right.
But we periodically will get that. Or the other thing that I'll see is I may have a coworker who absolutely doesn't need my help. I'll sit there and explain it and go through it, and the student's like, no. And then I'm added to a Zoom call.
Mm-hmm.
I tell them the exact same thing, and after hearing it from two professors, then they're like, oh, okay. But on the other side, that's the shocking thing. That, they don't want, when they ask for help and then don't want it.
So sometimes there's, you relate somehow better to one person than the other. And so when the first person tells you something, you just don't get it. And then when the second person tells you, it makes sense. So I've definitely seen that happen, and that's perfectly normal. That's fine.
I always describe that phenomenon. It's funny you mentioned that, because I really work very hard to talk at a very basic level and communicate with my students at a basic level. And sometimes, honestly, it's a struggle. And they'll be like, oh, you're so much easier to understand. Well, don't you hate it when you talk to a person who is talking at such an advanced high level that you don't feel quite sure you're about what they mean? I hate that.
There's some people who I think they feel like they do that to make themselves feel better.
Yes.
And that's, so I would address both sides of that coin in terms of, if you are asking for help, don't tell someone they don't know what they're talking about. Be humble and try to accept that help as it was intended, and ask questions if you need to. Most people that are trying to help you, if they're trying to help you, they will be, all too happy to answer follow-up questions, because you're respecting the advice that they gave you if you're trying to understand it. And if you get to the other side of that coin and your first name is now Doctor, don't try to make someone feel bad because their first name isn't Doctor. I mean, be humble then as well. I don't know what else to say about that.
Agreed. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Agreed.
But I agree with you. I mean, when you talk about trying to say things simply, okay, what was I just telling you? Research plans, who are you going to talk to? What are you going to ask them? And what are you going to do with their answers? I mean, if you can't understand that,
that's
sorry,
right.
I'm not sure how much more I can help. Like I said, we have to dive into that and make more sense of it, because you can't just, I don't want the third grade answer to those questions. I want the postdoctoral work answer to those questions. But still, for you to understand what we're getting at and what the important pieces are should make a lot of sense to you. I think we've had this conversation before when we've talked. I will explain someone's doctoral dissertation quantitative analysis to them, and we won't use any words that sound like math.
Yes.
We won't use numbers except for 5%, which those of you who know anything about statistics know that that's just a community standard we agreed on. It's like a magic number that we just decided was important. But it doesn't matter what the number is. What matters is, are we bigger or smaller than that number? We just draw a line in the sand. And we talk about it in those terms a lot of times, drawing a line in the sand, because that's what the community did. They said, this is where we're putting it. And other than that, we don't say anything that sounds like math hardly. And they understand things and they go in. And I've had students before who said that they came out of their defense and someone on their committee said, I never really understood that until you explained it to me, because they weren't trying to talk math where they didn't understand it either. They were saying, oh, well, this is all the test is doing. You know, if you want me to get a doctoral degree in statistics and derive the test for you and calculate all the moments and do all the integral calculus and all that kind of stuff, well, sorry, I'm not doing that. I'm getting my degree in education or in business or something. But if you want me to tell you, you know, which test I need to run and why and what it says, then yeah, this is how it works.
Right.
It should be that easy.
You're right. I agree.
What other insights do you think you'd be able to share from your side of the fence with folks that are struggling to through the dissertation process right now?
Let's see. One of the things that is really important that I find people don't focus on is they need to consider what access they have to gaining information for their dissertation.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times I'll see them set it up and they'll go, well, I'll just go to my school district and I'll ask for this information. And the school district says, well, once you have IRB approval, you can ask for it again.
Yeah.
And, you know, I tell the students, no, you need to check and make sure you can get it and get some sort of preliminary approval in writing. It says,
Right.
once you're approved by IRB, we'll provide this for you. And something else, and I know this is going to sound ridiculous, but I've seen this repeatedly. If you want to do a quantitative study, you have to have something that can be measured quantitatively, something with a numerical value. And I'm shocked that I've seen that a lot. And when sometimes somebody wants to do a quantitative study so bad, but data that they can get their hands on isn't quantifiable.
Mm.
And they'll get very upset when you say, well, you know, this would make a really great qualitative study, but you don't have anything here that's quantifiable that I can
And see, there the person just needs to think a little bit more about it, because a lot of quantitative studies have been done and a lot of instruments have been created. And so there's probably something, if it's not exactly what you're looking for, there's probably something close. We always talk about how are you going to operationalize your variable? And all that means is how are you going to measure it? All that means is there an instrument that is dealing with a concept that is essentially the same as what I'm talking about? You know, just as a case in point, a lot of times folks will talk about academic success as being a variable. I have a student I'm working with right now. That's one of his variables, academic success. Well, how do we measure academic success? In his case, the student's GPA. Boom, done. That's it. They don't have to answer a bunch of questions or anything. What is your GPA? Done. And is that a fair way of measuring academic success? Yeah, reasonably.
Yeah.
You know, it could be some other test result or something like that, but a GPA is pretty much your university's appraisal as to how successful you've been academically. So
that's right.
So that's the thing. And most things you get won't be that easy. There'll be an instrument somewhere that you'll have to utilize, and you'll have to make sure you have permission to use it and all that.
Yes.
But kind of like, you know, back in the day when the iPhone first came out, it was kind of useless. And then they created the App Store and they had this thing, there's an app for that. There's an instrument for that.
Yes. Oh, and I lost my train of thought. The other thing that I've encountered that students are struggling with is managing their time.
Hmm.
And I often point out to the students, especially is when you hit the dissertation level, you know, if your school is shoving you in a lot of classes, which I've seen them do, say no. You're paying for it. I mean, you can check and see what that does to your financial aid if you're getting that. But if you're coming up on something that you know is going to be difficult, for example, a lot of people will struggle with writing chapter 2. Well, then maybe it's not a good idea to take 3 other classes or 2 other classes.
Doing that. Yeah. Yeah. See, for me, it seems like time management, the issue with time management for folks is not about managing their time. It's about knowing what the heck they're doing. Because you struggle and you're not efficient, and things don't get done when you don't know what to do and how to do it. And so don't be ashamed or embarrassed or, too prideful to admit to someone, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. Can you help me? Because, reasonable definition of a student is, I don't know what I'm doing yet. And as long as we have that yet word at the end, this phrase, I don't know what I'm doing, which sounds despondent and desperate, changes to something hopeful and optimistic. Hey, I don't know what I'm doing yet. I'm going to be better tomorrow. I'm going to be better the next day. So keep that in mind, and don't be ashamed to say I don't know something, because no one knows everything. It's just not going to happen. Doesn't matter how many doctoral degrees you get, you're never going to get there. So know what you know what you don't know, and don't be ashamed of the fact that the I don't know bucket has some stuff in it.
Well, that's true. I collaborate with colleagues all the time because I am not an expert in every research design.
Right.
I have colleagues that are better at different things than me, and I will reach out to them all the time. I also frequently will sit and read and look something up. How do I do that? Well, let's experiment with this a little bit first, and
See what works.
right.
And like you said, reading is a good thing to do. Someone else has probably figured out at least some part of what you're going to do. I know whenever we're having a big holiday meal or something like that, I like to cook big things. And the first thing I'll do is I'll jump on YouTube and I'll see what a few people are doing, and I'll get the basics of, okay, here's how long you need to do certain things and how you want to do it so that you don't like poison everybody and they die. And then after I got that part, then I go off and do what I want to do, because I'm free to play with it and do it the way I want to. But first, always for me, the first step is let's go find some other people who've already done this. Whether I think I'm generally smarter than them, whether I think I'm generally a better cook than them, or any of those things, I need to learn how to do this thing. So let me go find some people who can do this thing and see what they have to say about it.
Absolutely. I used YouTube a lot as a student and as a professor.
So now, a couple of other things that you had mentioned to me. You got, it said you've done some work teaching English as a second language. And I think that it's interesting that we had one of our students from dissertation done, ended up doing the same thing after she retired from higher ed administration. She decided that she wanted to keep working, keep doing some things to stay active and engaged. And it turns out that this idea of teaching English as a foreign language worked for her, and her doctoral degree was a little bit of an asset in getting work in that environment. So how did you come upon that, and what was that experience like for you?
I stumbled across that as I was finishing up my degree. My employer had closed without warning. We were literally locked out.
Oh,
And and I went from there, and then I got an internship at our local medical university.
okay.
And as I was finishing that up, I just fell into this. Somebody said, hey, I saw your resume on LinkedIn, and I think that you would be really good at this.
Okay.
And I had already discovered that I liked teaching. I wish I'd have known that, right out of high school. But
Yeah.
I went ahead and I gave it a try. And before I gave it a try, because they had you teach a sample class to see if they
Okay.
wanted to hire you. So I did a lot of reading of the expectations for the type of class that I was going to be teaching, and the expectations for the company for which I was doing that, and they liked me. And while I was working for them, I went and obtained my certifications for teaching ESOL and TALE, for teaching mostly children English as a second language. But I also had adults, and I did that online. And I have to say that I really did enjoy that.
Yeah.
It was, I like using my mind every day at work, but sometimes at the end of the day now I have a headache. And there was something just very refreshing about being able to teach these children. And most of the time, the parents were nearby, not
Right.
always, but it was just a very different experience. They were more appreciative a lot of times. And I would just think to myself as I was dealing with these children, a lot of times I would just think, oh, how precious, how special.
Yeah. Yeah.
And having the doctorate, I think, is actually what ultimately got me moving forward on that, because I found more and more clients because I was Dr. Ball.
Exactly.
Um, yeah, when you have doctor in front of your name, usually it does open doors for you.
And
Um,
that's one of the things I think is so interesting about this particular thing, opportunity, is that there's nothing in the job description, nothing in the requirements that would say that you needed a PhD or a doctoral degree at all. But what happens is there's a big list of people who do this work in a directory, and there's parents who are choosing people. And how many parents are going to say, hey, I want to be able to tell everybody at the tea shop or the coffee shop or whatever, my little girl is being taught by an American doctor, being taught English by an American doctor, as opposed to,
yeah, well, it's true,
yeah,
and it worked.
yeah,
And the doctorate also, I mean, the other function that I like to do with the doctorate is usually for me on a more personal note, but I've taught others how to do this, to take those research skills
mm-hmm.
and then be able to apply them to anything else
Oh yes,
is amazing. Because let's talk about, well, let's just take the pandemic, for example. When I didn't know what to believe because our mainstream media can't seem to keep a single storyline straight, I started reading the research. What did the research say? I had no opinion, and now I'm going into it, and what does the research say? When I have to make a decision on something, if it's something, a research topic, I will go read the research. If I know somebody who wants to help themselves, or maybe they want to, argue with the school board, or with government, or promote a program, whatever it is they're trying to do, I've often taught, my family approaches me a lot over this. Okay, will you show me how to read this? And where do I find this stuff? And I started explaining the basic meanings of reading the research, and where to find it. Because for most people, think about it, most people who don't have a master's or a doctorate, where do you find the research,
right.
right? And how do you hunt that down? That's
You know,
the issue.
that's true. And being able to just learning to think critically is very, very important. And so I think that's the transition. That's what a lot of students say. Well, I don't understand why they won't, accept my dissertation yet, or why they won't pass me, or why they won't let me graduate. And it's not that they're holding you back; it's that you're not ready yet. Um, when you can say these things properly, and you can look at a situation, look at a problem, and just dissect it and figure it out, then you're ready. And that's the thing, is that when you learn how to think critically, it just pays off in so many ways.
Yes, I agreed. And it just, I would encourage anybody to take those skills and go ahead and apply them
Yeah,
in other areas of your life. I cannot tell you how much that it has helped me, even with my health. You know, the
yeah.
doctor
Being
couldn't
able to
figure
go out
something out.
and advocate for yourself is important.
Right.
Um, but I think so
Out,
many of our
did it.
students, when they're struggling to get through this process, there might be moments of self-doubt, and is it worth it? And I think that the example that you gave just a little bit earlier about the work you were doing with teaching the kids English as a second language, it shows you not only the opportunities out there. The doctoral degree does open doors and bring opportunities to you, but there are going to be opportunities that you weren't looking for, that you didn't know were out there, that you weren't anticipating or manufacturing on your own, that will still find you. And you get to decide at that point whether you want to do this or not. So if somebody's there listening saying, she did all this and she's teaching English to a bunch of kids, what a loser. What the? No, this is you
No.
making choices and having opportunities so that you can decide what you want to do. Because if that's the kind of thing you're into, awesome, do it. If it's not, guess what? There's going to be some other opportunities. Everybody gets
Well,
to choose their path, and that's the cool thing about having
that's the
that
big
credential.
thing, right?
That's
What
the thing.
makes you happy? You
Yeah,
know, I knew some of what I wanted to do with it starting out, not everything, but I have discovered, you know, the whole angle, the whole reason for this was to be able to do something I liked doing,
exactly.
you know.
And everybody's different. You know, someone might say, "Hey, I was able to get a 30 or 40 or 50% raise in my corporate job, and I'm ecstatic about that." And meanwhile, I'm like, "Oh, you're sitting in this cube and you've got a boss telling you what to do and stuff like that." It's like, oh, I couldn't do that. So it's just what you want to do and being able to make your choices and your decisions. That this degree is, obviously anybody can do that anyway, but this degree just provides so many more opportunities for folks, to be able to have more decisions, more options to decide amongst.
Well, not only that, I think that by learning the critical thinking and all of the skills of relationship building and all of that that comes along with it, I always tell people, you know what, if that opportunity you wanted didn't present itself, look around, see what is needed, and make your own opportunity. And
Absolutely.
if you've earned a doctorate, you're capable of making your own opportunity.
And now you're talking about people that have more of an entrepreneurial spirit, people who are willing to go out there and set a path, or walk, you know, the path less traveled. Um, and you know, now those are my people. I really enjoy that. That's why we're, you know, now helping folks who have their doctoral degrees, who really want to get their message out to the world, become published authors, because it's such a great authority platform for the masses. So if you've got a book written by Dr. So-and-so, yeah, that's a golden ticket right there.
Oh yeah, it sure is. So there's just a lot. There are a lot of reasons to go out and earn one, and I just tell people that you have to be tenacious. This
Yeah,
isn't not to set a timeline and say I'm going to be a doctor by the timeline is the goals that things that you want to finish, but don't make them contingent on somebody else's approval. I'm going to have approval by, no. You could say, I'm going to have chapter 1 written by the end of next week. That's great. But don't say, I'm going to have chapter 1 approved by the end of next week. No. But, you know, if you're tenacious, I think that's probably the most important piece.
determination is really important,
Mhm.
but knowing what you're doing is important too. You know, if the water is really determined to roll uphill, it's not going to happen.
Well,
Um,
that's true.
you've got to make sure you're going in the right direction. So what do I mean by that? So many dissertation students will are kind of moving at an angle to the direction they should be going, or even going the wrong way to get their dissertation done. And they're really determined and they're working hard, but they're not working in a direction that will particularly ever or will soon get them to graduation. So you want to make sure that you map your path, you know where you're going, and then yeah, keep at it. Just keep at it, because I'm convinced earning a doctoral degree is much more about determination than it is intelligence. You're going to have to be smart. You're going to have to do some work, and that work can be hard depending on how just, you know, mentally quick you are to start with. But anybody can do it. Just about anybody can do it, as long as you put your mind to it and keep going. Just keep going.
I would absolutely agree with that. I mean, I always tell people when they get to that, it's like, you know, it's the foregone conclusion that you're smart. You're obviously smart. You already have a master's degree, blah, blah, blah. You know,
How you got here? Yeah,
this is about being tenacious and able to take feedback and think things through and, you know, independent learning, that kind of thing.
yeah. So tenacity is the word. That's awesome. Um, well, Dr. Ball, I've had a wonderful time talking with you today. If someone wanted to reach out to you and continue this conversation at all, what's a good way for them to do that?
Oh, let's see. see, I would like to start with an email. So I can be emailed, let's use my personal email at aislyn125@gmail.com.
Okay, and let's give that out one more time. I want to make sure I've got it down correctly.
It's ashlyn125@gmail.com. AISLYNN125@gmail.com.
All right, ashlyn125@gmail.com. If you'd like to reach out to Dr. Ball and talk about anything that continue this conversation at all, that would be awesome. For those of you who are out there working on your dissertation, struggling with it, maybe not even started yet, and you just want to proactively make sure you're going to get this done as quickly as possible, reach out to us at dissertationdone.com, and we will see if you're a good fit for our Fast Track Your Dissertation coaching program. Whether you feel like you're ahead of the game, struggling to keep up, or so far behind you're about ready to quit, let's have a conversation and see what we might be able to do. dissertationdone.com/done. And again, if you're out there living your unconventional life, you're an expert, and you, like Dr. Ball mentioned, you want to create your own opportunity. The best way to do that is become a published author with Doctor, your name on the byline, and we can help you with that, going from a blank page. You don't even have to know what you want to write the book about yet. We'll help you figure all that out, get it written, get the internal layout done, the cover done, get it published and out the door so that you can use it as your business card. People can find you on Amazon. It's the best thing you can do to establish your authority platform. And we do that through our Expand Your Authority program. You can learn more about it at dissertationdone.com/book. Dr. Ball, again, thank you so much for being with us here today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
You're so welcome.
I'm going to put a little pitch up before you do.
Yes, go ahead.
Everybody, I always tell people about Dr. Strickland and actually refer people to him myself. So he does some great work and he knows what he's doing and he's some amazing help. So I recommend him too.
I certainly appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you very much. For everybody out there listening, go out and live your unconventional life. Have a great day.
This has been An Unconventional Life. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe now to keep getting inspirational stories of unconventional lives as soon as they're released. Until then, go out and live your best unconventional life.